Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Taimur Shamil. This week was very significant as far as developments on foreign policy are concerned. In a phone call with Sheikh Hasina of Bangladesh, Prime Minister Imran Khan talked about very important points. The first thing that he talked about was the COVID-19 as the challenge for Pakistan as well as for Bangladesh. He said that both countries can cooperate in terms of fighting COVID-19. He also talked about the debt relief for developing countries in this situation of COVID-19. These points were very important when we look at Pakistan and Bangladesh relations. Pakistan is exploring more options, more diplomatic options in the region. We have seen that as Prime Minister Imran Khan had a phone call with Sheikh Hasina. This talks about how Pakistan and Bangladesh are now improving their relations. Of course, there is a historical baggage, but coming out of it is important and it's necessary for both Pakistan as well as for Bangladesh. Prime Minister Imran Khan and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina also talked about Indian occupied Kashmir. This is the most important point that both Prime Ministers talked about. Keeping in mind that both people in Pakistan and in Bangladesh, they are very concerned about the Indian atrocities in Indian occupied Kashmir. A lot of Bangladeshis are concerned about it. There have been massive rallies in Bangladesh condemning the Indian atrocities in Indian occupied Kashmir. Both Prime Ministers also talked about reaffirming Pakistan's commitment to SAARC. They talked about that they would be working for peace and stability in the region. Peace and stability is also one of the key points when it comes to Pakistan and Bangladesh. We have seen that there are some countries who have been playing the role of a spoiler. Let it be Afghanistan, let it be instigating and financing and supporting terrorism in Balochistan. For that matter, India has been playing the role of a spoiler. So for Pakistan and Bangladesh, the regional peace and stability is one of the most important things. Prime Minister Imran Khan also extended an invitation to his Bangladeshi counterpart, and we expect that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina would be visiting Pakistan on Prime Minister's invitation. This is very important. This development on Pakistan's foreign policy is very important. Reaching out to other neighbors, diversifying its foreign policy is what is needed at the moment. We'll be also be discussing about Indian occupied Kashmir, the way India has been trying to change the demographics, especially after the abrogation of 370 and 35A, and specifically giving domiciles to many Indians who would now be settling in Indian occupied Kashmir and changing the demographics of Kashmir. This can change the situation over there in Indian occupied Kashmir. But at the same time, we also have to keep in mind the resistance that Kashmiris have been showing to the Indian forces in Indian occupied, and the indigenous movement that is getting strengthened day by day in Indian occupied Kashmir by the Kashmiris. We'll also be discussing about a recent airstrike by the Afghan Air Force in which 45 people, civilians most of them, were killed. This also included 6 Taliban commanders. And this development is huge because the peace deal that the region is looking forward to has now become more sort of a fragile peace deal. The intra-Afghan talks were expected to take place next month. Many people were expecting it to take place this month, but we see that at the moment it is a bit foggy and things are not that clear. The violence continues in Afghanistan. Taliban continue to carry out strikes and attacks against the Afghan forces. Afghan forces have recently carried out this airstrike against the Taliban commander. What would be the future of Afghanistan, the political situation over there, and most importantly, the civilians who have suffered the most in this war in Afghanistan? We'll be discussing about this. We are joined by a special guest. Mr. Shafiq Ahmed is a renowned journalist and expert on the regional political matters. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Ahmed. We're also joined by Ambassador Asif Durrani, renowned senior diplomat and expert on Pakistan's foreign policy. I'll start with Mr. Shafiq Ahmed. This phone call between Prime Minister Imran Khan and his counterpart, Bangladeshi counterpart Sheikh Hasina, how do you see it? This is a very important and significant development on the foreign policy front. How do you see this development?
It is indeed very positive, because we know that we have a little bit problem since this 1971 after the separation of Bangladesh or creation of Bangladesh from Pakistan. So we had a little bit baggage and we had a problem. So now things are changing. It is because of India, because India currently don't have any good relation with any of its neighbor because of the worst policies adopted by the BJP government. They have a strained relation with China, strained relation with Pakistan, bad relation with Nepal, bad relation with Bangladesh
and Iran
Iran. But Iran is not the next door neighbor, but I'm talking the immediate neighbors.
Right.
So what happened, like now this is the time for Pakistan to establish good relation with all those countries. Pakistan fortunately have already good relation with most of these countries except Bangladesh.
Right.
So this is the time, and it was a very good decision by the Prime Minister of Pakistan who telephoned Sheikh Hasina and discussed all important issues including the COVID-19 and also the Kashmir. So this is a positive development. Why Bangladesh is unhappy the relation with India? Because of the CAA, the Citizen Amendment Act, and there was rally not only in Bangladesh against this CAA, but also in Bihar, where majority of the Bangladeshi people migrated, and they are born in Bihar. They're born in these areas which are close to Bangladesh,
Right.
and the India with this amendment, they may throw out a lot of Bangladeshis. Where they will go, no one knows. So the law has created more problem for
And
the
most of
people
them are Muslims.
Most of them are Muslims. So they are creating more problem for the Muslims in India, and that is the reason that Bangladesh have a little bit strained relations with India, and Pakistan has really did a good job, like establishing better relation with Bangladesh.
Ambassador Durrani, welcome to the show. Discussing about this recent development and this phone call, how do you assess the situation? Prime Minister's call to his Bangladeshi counterpart, Sheikh Hasina.
I think it was most propitious opportunity which Prime Minister availed, and given the prevailing situation in the region, especially as Mr. Shafiq Ahmed has mentioned, after the promulgation of CAA and NRC, it's mostly the Bengalis who have been affected. They have been delisted. They have been deprived of the citizenship, and almost 1.9 million are confined in a sort of a concentration camps in Assam. And this has happened at a time when Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina considered to be very close to the Indians. So this is so in that respect, Modi government has stabbed her in the back, and Prime Minister's call, in fact, is going to reinforce the idea that India has been playing a bully to its neighbors, and even when you want to be closer to India, you want to throw their policies, and even then, the Hindutva forces at the moment who are riding on a high horse are actually creating these troubles, and then the kind of hatred they have generated inside India is also spilling over to the neighborhood. And NRC and CA are a part of it. Yes.
Right. And Ambassador Durrani, both premiers talked about Indian-occupied Kashmir. This is very important and significant. How do you see this talk of Kashmir between the Pakistani Prime Minister and Bangladeshi Prime Minister?
Well, I think the Foreign Office statement says that Prime Minister raised the issue of Jammu and Kashmir with Sheikh Hasina. I'm not privy to the details what they may have, but knowing our own policy, how this has come about. So after the 5th August last year, Modi government's action has deteriorated the situation. Kashmiris have been ghettoized. They are living in Auschwitz-like camps for the past 1 year, and almost 9 million people. It's the highest concentration camp in the world ever, even more than what had happened against the Jews by the Nazis. So I think they have, Prime Minister must have talked about the way the peace has got a setback in the entire region. And it's just not Pakistan and India, it is also entire neighborhood in South Asia, which has been affected due to unscrupulous policies of the Modi government. Yes.
And do you see this phone call as a phone call that would break the ice between Pakistan and Bangladesh, and we're expecting in future more developments on this, on Pakistan's relations with Bangladesh? Do you think that we are going to strengthen that? Because the points
I
that
think
were
it
discussed
should.
were very important, talking about regional stability, Indian occupied Kashmir, strengthening SARC for that matter. So these all points were very important.
Yeah, I think it should because already the work was been done, and Mr. Modi's action of 5th August in occupied Kashmir, that has not only annoyed Pakistan or the Kashmiris, but also the Chinese, because India, when it showed a new map of Ladakh, so they included Aksai Chin, which is with China, as part of Indian territory. So what you have seen in the Galwan Valley, the situation and the military standoff between China and India is part of this August 5th action. Same is the case with Bangladesh, when Citizenship Amendment Act and National Register of Citizens, NRC, were issued by the Indian government. So it all of a sudden 1.9 million Bengalis became stateless. so there is a commonality of interest between Pakistan and Bangladesh, that they are the victim of Indian hegemonic designs. So therefore, there is a commonality of interest, and which should bring the two countries together. Yes.
Right, right. Ambassador Durrani, please stay with us on phone call. Mr. Ahmed, talking about foreign policy and diversifying foreign policy is, I think, need of the hour for Pakistan, because we have to explore more alliances, more friends that we can have in the region, especially to keep a check on those spoilers who want to disturb the strategic balance in the region. So, reaching out to Bangladesh, how important is that for Pakistan in terms of foreign policy? And Prime Minister talked about strengthening SARC. How do you see this?
Look, SARC is very, very important forum, but unfortunately it is defunct since the BJP government came into power in 2014. So, sorry, it need to be revived, and the hegemony of this India over the SARC countries, over the issue of, they're creating different issues with different countries, and that is why they don't want that the SARC countries to discuss any important issue at this important forum, which is SARC.
Right.
So it is non-functional. So revival of SARC is very important to have stability in the region. They should discuss all the outstanding issues between the neighbors. So this is important forum. But India actually, being the largest, the big country in the region, they actually did not want that it should be revived or it should play important role, because the more SARC will play important role, the more India will be exposed. Like currently we have a lot of issues in India, and the Pakistan and other SARC members, they should have discussed all these matters at the SARC forum. But since there is no SARC forum available to discuss these matters, so India is very happy. And that is why Prime Minister Imran Khan raised this important issue to revive SARC and to make it a potent organization to discuss all the matters which are pending or thorny between the different countries. All these matters should be discussed in this important forum.
Right. Ambassador Durrani, looking at the recent regional developments, the way we saw India got dropped out of the Iran's Chabahar railway project, Pakistan reaches out to Bangladesh. So there are rapidly changing regional dynamics. Pakistan's foreign policy in this regional dynamics, how do you see that, and how do you see the proactiveness of foreign policy? Do you think that we are working on it, that we are proactive on reaching out to more alliances, more friends in the region?
I think we already have. I think we have friendship with Iran. We don't have a dispute with Iran. We may have differences in perceptions, which is natural. What has happened with regard to railway line between Chabahar to Zaidan, Indians were lukewarm from the very beginning. They just wanted to concentrate on Chabahar. so that they can keep an eye on Gwadar, which is just 70 kilometers away. So I'm of from opinion that for India, it is not the transit trade or the trade with Afghanistan or Central Asia, but it has more strategic consideration, and that is just to keep an eye on Gwadar. This is what they are doing. So they have opposed China-Pakistan economic corridor, and then they want to see at the end at Gwadar that how it transpires. So with regard to Iran, what they have done is, I think these are the issues because India has been fast going towards the American camp. And American sanctions against Iran are pinching Iran to a greater extent. Their economy has received a setback. There's no doubt about it. International banking is not supporting trade with Iran. So, and then Iranian currency has had a fall, almost 100% depreciated. So these are the aftermaths of American sanctions, and Indians have joined the American camp. So therefore, Iranians they have looked at the game, and for them, the Chinese, I think they are a persistent and sincere ally, and China has stood by Iran. So this is a natural rebalancing which Iran is doing. And for us, I think it suits, yes.
Right. And Ambassador Durrani, this claim that India thinks that they are non-aligned and they won't take any side or they won't take any part, do you agree with that, or that is just a claim that they won't align themselves with any one, let's say, party?
India has never been a non-aligned country. It used the rhetoric just to play with the gallery and both sides of the fence. They were visibly tilted towards former Soviet Union during the Cold War period. That's why the American all defense equipment, massively more than 70% is of Soviet origin, and now it's Russian origin. Of course, they are trying, just changing it, replacing it with the Americans, but it will take years and decades to come and to know the system. So India has never been a non-aligned country. Yes, till the time when Mr. Nehru was alive, he had, some romantic tryst with the international affairs. He did try that, but subsequently it dawned upon them that in the real politics, you have to take sides. So therefore, they were on the American camp. If you recall, when Soviet troops entered Afghanistan, India was supporting the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. And the present dispensation, which are the Mujahideen, these people were dubbed as terrorists by India. So now times have changed. Now they claim to be allies of Afghan. But I think the people have seen the game, and India, in this whole scenario, has emerged as a spoiler in Afghanistan's peace, because it looks at Afghanistan through Pakistani prism, and for them, a peace in Afghanistan would be harmful to Indian agenda. Yes.
Right. Very interesting. Mr. Durrani, I'll get back to you. Please stay with us. Mr. Ahmed, this point is very important, that if India has joined the US camp, let's say, and as Ambassador Durrani rightly said, that India has never been actually non-aligned, that is just rhetoric, and especially now they have realized that they have to go and join one camp. Then what about Afghanistan at the moment? Moving on to our next topic, 45 people were killed in an airstrike by the Afghan Air Force. 6 of them were the Taliban commanders. Since we're discussing about India, do you think India would continue to play the role of a spoiler in Afghanistan? Because there are a lot of political factions in Afghanistan who think that peace and stability doesn't suit to their political designs, and India would be supporting those political factions. Do you see it that way?
Exactly. India is definitely playing a spoiler role because India is out from the entire Central Asia. India doesn't have any friend in Central Asia because they know that Taliban are coming to Kabul to run the government. Maybe when they will come, I don't know, because there are some problems, like the fight is going on between the government forces and the Taliban in different areas. But apparently they will come because Taliban has shown the power, and the way the Ashraf Ghani government is getting weaker and weaker because of certain factors, including the withdrawal of US military from Afghanistan. Number two, the COVID-19 is really damaging economy of Afghanistan. They are already poor country. Afghanistan is a poor
Right.
country, further damaging the Afghanistan economy. And there is some statistic that in the coming months, the poverty, 70% of population of Afghanistan will be below the red line of poverty.
Right.
So when there is more poverty for Ashraf Ghani to run the government will be very difficult. So Taliban will definitely have upper hand. So since dynamics or politics is changing in Afghanistan, India is playing a spoiler role. They are apparently funding and financing BLA, Balochistan Liberation Army. They are carrying out terrorist activity in Pakistan, number one. Number two, they are also supporting Ansarul Islam, or Khalid Umar Khorasani
Group,
is
right.
the head. The group, they are getting support from India or from RAW, Research and Analysis Wing. And apparently they are also getting, there are some strong reports that they are getting, India is funding Daesh Khorasani, like ISS Khorasani group.
Chapter.
They are sponsoring this group. So apparently India will continue playing this negative or villain role in Afghanistan, because if there is a stability in Afghanistan, it will help the Afghan government, it will help the people of Afghanistan, but India doesn't want this. India want to continue this kind of problem in Afghanistan, and it will go on because they are spending money, they are providing them arms and weapons
Right.
to these terrorist organizations, and they are carrying out their
This might continue,
terror activities.
Ambassador Durrani, talking about spoilers in Afghanistan and the recent political situation, the wave of violence in Afghanistan, as you said earlier, that India has joined the US camp. Do you think that US would rethink about giving India some sort of role in Afghanistan, keeping in mind that in the past they have been playing the role of a spoiler, as Mr. Ahmed just said, that they have been funding TTP, they have been funding Jamaatul Ahrar at one point, they have been funding ISIS now. India's role in Afghanistan, and what are Americans expecting from the recent political development?
I don't think what Americans could do in Afghanistan, India would be capable of doing that. So therefore, India would not commit its troops. Secondly, Americans want to leave Afghanistan because, as President Trump has repeatedly said, that Afghanistan is a $50 billion per annum liability for them with no results. So that's why they entered into a deal with the Taliban. And when they entered the deal with Taliban, definitely they sidelined President Ghani and his government. Reason being that President Ghani he is confined to Kabul, like his predecessor, President Hamid Karzai was called as the mayor of Kabul. And himself, President Ghani has said that when American troops leave, it is a matter of 6 months that the whole structure would collapse in Afghanistan. And when you talk about the spoilers are both internal and external. So internal spoilers are those who are rent seekers in Afghanistan. They think that this crisis suits them, and in the name of blaming some outsiders, including Pakistan, of stoking unrest in Afghanistan. So they can live with that, and they have to do nothing. Only the Americans had to do. But here, when you talk about outside spoilers, then India is the one. And India supports those elements in Afghanistan who do not want peace returning to Afghanistan. When you talk about the Taliban have been persistent. They have they regrouped after the fall in after 9/11, and then they put up a fierce resistance. Reason being, the government, whether it was Hamid Karzai or Ashraf Ghani, they could not dispense with socio-economic justice for the people. And that is why they are now reaping the harvest they had sown. And while Taliban may have their own axe to grind, they may have their own policy, But the reason being that the peace returning to Afghanistan is very important, especially for Pakistan. And this does not suit India, because if peace returns to Afghanistan, then there will be no scope for India to maneuver. Yes.
Right, right. Mr. Rani, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you for having
We'll be
me. Thank you.
Right. We'll be discussing about Afghanistan and the political future of Afghanistan. In a recent airstrike, 45 people were killed in Herat, and this is certainly disturbing. The American envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has been tweeting about the situation, and he has been saying that what is needed at the moment is that all parties should restrain the violence that is going on in Afghanistan and work for peace and stability. But the point is that how would this intra-Afghan peace talks would move on while this violence continues in Afghanistan? Ambassador Durrani just rightly mentioned that Pakistan and Afghanistan both want peace and stability in the region, but at the same time, there are spoilers inside Afghanistan, in the region, who do not want any peace settlement in Afghanistan. We'll be discussing about this and Indian-occupied Kashmir after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. This week was violent inside Afghanistan. 45 people were killed in an airstrike by the Afghan airstrike, and 6 of those people were the Taliban commanders, but rest of them were civilians according to the reports. Mr. Ahmed, talking about this violence that is going on in Afghanistan, these airstrikes have never been precise. Most of them, the victims have been civilians for that matter. There is rampant criticism of the Ghani administration, the way they are addressing this issue, the way they are fighting with the Taliban. Of course, Taliban are also carrying out attacks against the Afghan forces, but such airstrikes which kill the civilians is a major concern, not just for the people of Afghanistan, but also for other major stakeholders. US envoy, American envoy, Zalmay Khalilzad is very much concerned about it, and he tweeted about it because this jeopardizes the very idea of intra-Afghan peace talks, and perhaps this might delay the intra-Afghan peace talks. Americans are very much concerned about it because they want to get out of Afghanistan. What do you make out of the situation in Afghanistan?
Look, the NATO, American, the Afghan forces, they have committed war crime in Afghanistan. They have committed. But because United Nations is not that much strong, they cannot take action against the NATO forces because they have killed civilians. American forces, yes, they have killed civilians. They have bombed the wedding ceremonies, they have bombed the madrasas, the seminaries where innocent students as 5 or 6 or 7 years old boys, they were killed.
Even in drone strikes for that, but at one point.
Okay, so they are all involved in the war crime. You know, when Taliban were leaving the Kabul government, at that time America claimed that there were only 5,000 to 6,000 Taliban who were controlling the entire Afghanistan. But you know how many people have so far been killed? More than 100,000 people have been killed in the last 18 years. So when you say it's just 5, it's a US statement, by the way, it's not I'm saying. US statement saying that just 5,000 or 6,000 Taliban were controlling entire Afghanistan, but you have killed more than 100,000 Afghans. It means majority of the civilians are killed in this war. So all these, Zalmay, why he's worried about it? At least 8 major incident of killing innocent civilian is on the shoulder of US troops in Afghanistan. They have killed.
But Afghan forces too. I mean, this violence has been continuing from all sides. I mean,
from all,
even
yes.
Taliban have been, you know,
they have killed
targeting
people
in
killing
Kabul.
civilian people. Yes, that is true. That is true. I mean, the situation, peace is the only solution to all the problems. I think that Ashraf Ghani, who is adamant and stick that he is not going to release 600 Afghan Taliban, he is strict because he believed or he say that they are involved in many criminal acts. So they are not going to release.
Is he using those 600 Taliban prisoners as a bargaining chip?
Of course.
With the Taliban to gain some kind of political mileage?
I think yes, that is true because what is my understanding, Ashraf Ghani doesn't see his political future in this country. Taliban may come after a month or after maybe 1 year, I don't know. Because already Taliban is controlling more than 55 or 60% of Afghanistan. The government...
So on the ground they have control of
Of course on the ground. They are based in, for example, they are based in Kabul, they may be based in Kandahar, maybe in Herat, the central cities.
Southeast.
But otherwise, the other districts and the small areas, Taliban is fully controlling it. So, I mean, since I say that the US troops are only 8,600 in Afghanistan currently, and they are gradually withdrawing it. When the withdrawal is completed, the Afghan government will not be that much strong.
So do you think that Ashraf Ghani would be in a position to bargain with the Taliban?
He is
politically?
Trying. I think he is trying. That is why he is not releasing 600 Taliban. The talks, the intra-Afghan dialogue is delayed. This is the reason. And I wish that it should be held as soon as possible because peace and stability in Afghanistan is very important, not for the people of Afghanistan, but also for Pakistan and other neighbors.
And do you think that if they do not release those 600 Taliban prisoners, we can see more violence in Afghanistan? Do you think the situation can get more violent? Because Taliban are up for every kind of violence, in Afghanistan. They have carried out a strike on NDS headquarters in Samangan.
In Samangan,
so
yes,
this has been going on. So do you think that situation can become more violent in the future?
Look, after this peace agreement with the US in February this year, Taliban got energy. They have a strong belief that they can handle the situation. They have the way they handled with the situation with America. So if they can defeat America, let me use this word, if they can defeat America, they can defeat easily the Ashraf Ghani forces. So this is what is the belief of the Taliban.
Which are dependent on US.
Yes, Ashraf Ghani definitely is depending on US, and US is gradually reducing the number of troops. Like if 150,000 NATO and US forces could not defeat the Taliban, so how can the Afghan National Army or 8,600 US troops can defeat Taliban? So Taliban will definitely come. The Afghan Taliban I'm talking. I'm not talking about TTP. It's a terrorist organization. So Afghan Taliban, definitely they will come to the government. They have already all the energies because they successfully negotiated with the US, and they are very successful, by the way.
And US wants to get rid of this Afghan war as soon as possible because this is the election year.
I think yes, that is true. This is the election year. In November there will be election. They want to say something, to tell the people, though it's a little bit humiliation to the US, by the way they withdraw. They were forced to withdraw troops from Afghanistan because they could not get control in the last 18 years. They could not defeat Taliban, despite claiming that only 500,000 to 600,000 Taliban were running the entire or ruling the entire Afghanistan. So this claim proved a lie, by the way, from the US. So it's a little bit humiliation for the US, and US will definitely want to have a peace in Afghanistan. But we have a spoiler in the shape of India. India will not like it. India may have some other agendas. They may be using Ashraf Ghani, they may be using Dr. Abdullah, no one knows. But definitely India is a spoiler.
You have been covering and you have been observing Afghanistan for a long time now. Looking at the internal political situation in Afghanistan, do you think that if once US withdraws its troops from Afghanistan, the political factions inside Afghanistan, they would be in a position where they can settle their own differences? Because keeping in mind that Afghanistan is at its very core a very tribal society, and there is rampant warlordism as well. We cannot deny that. Interestingly, the Tajik commander, he also became the chief. How do you see all the situation?
Look, they were war. Yes, Abdul Rashid Dostum, Ismail Khan, Hazrat Ali, I mean, they are different warlord, and still they are warlords. By the way, they have private militias. I mean, they do apparently claim to be part of the Afghan National Army, but no, they have their own private militia. So I think controlling or handling the Afghan situation is not that much easy. Afghanistan is no doubt a tribal society, a resilient ethnic group, like they resist everything, and there has been fighting since 1979 in different shapes. So I mean, the war which started almost 41 years back, it is still going on. So they lived in a war-like situation, and they know how to survive.
But this has crippled the opportunities for the region. You know, this has crippled Afghanistan's economy, and not just Afghanistan's economy. I'm just thinking that if once this war is over, people from Islamabad can drive to Tirmiz or Uzbekistan in 8 to 10 hours. You know, the connectivity, the potential of this region is huge. The potential of Afghanistan and Central Asia and Pakistan is huge. How can we achieve these goals, and do you think that this is doable in future? Do you see this happening in future?
Of course. Afghanistan, no, the Afghan people knew about one thing, that they have a very good natural resources, like a different kind of resources they have.
Right.
So, I mean, once there is a stability, the economy can be grown. Like there was a time when the American used to visit for tourism, used to go to Kabul for tourism. Afghanistan, Kabul land is very beautiful, by the way.
Late 60s, 70s.
60s, 70s.
There was a whole hippie movement, you know.
The hippies time, the hippies era, they used to travel. They used to stay in Peshawar. It was a very peaceful area. Once peace is restored, there will be a lot of tourists in Afghanistan. But I wish there should be a peace restored in Afghanistan, because it is war ravaged. Like it has been torn by the war. Over 100,000 civilians or people have been killed in this war, which is enough. Like fighting, Muslims are fighting against Muslims. This is really wrong.
Coming back to my this central question, that do you think that this warlordism would go away, or let me put it in another way, that do you think that these people would have a consensus on peace, on having peace in Afghanistan?
I think possible. There is possible, because Taliban apparently getting support. Like when Taliban come to the Kabul, or let's start ruling, they will have support from the international community.
Right.
And I think once peace is restored, so I personally believe the Taliban this time should have a different model of ruling Afghanistan. They should involve different people. Like there should be a democracy. Not like.
So you think that over the years Taliban have changed?
I think yes, of course. There is some commitment with Zalmay Khalilzad, like women education, which were banned during the first rule of Taliban. It may not be banned anymore, and they will also involve some other people to take part in the election process.
Even in Moscow, when they had a meeting with the Taliban had meetings with different Afghan political factions, we saw a lot of women who participated in those Moscow talks, and they met the Taliban, and we saw different Taliban in Moscow. So you think that this can go on, and they have also learned over the years that they cannot continue with their mindset that was back in, let's say, 90s or 80s?
That is true. It seems to be changed. Like they ruled for 5 years, like from 1996 onward up to 2001. So that rule was entirely different, and they have learned from their mistakes, and they were criticized at that time, and they face the criticism where they are wrong. They have a good intention, but the operation style or running the government was extremely wrong. So they have learned from their past mistakes, and I personally believe when they come to power this time, there will be change. The government style will be changed. There will be more room for the women, there will be more room for the education of girls, there will be more room for other factions like ethnic groups to join the government through election process, through the process of democracy. That's I'm expecting from the Afghan Taliban.
And there would be, do you expect that a joint government, let's say, because it would not be just the Taliban, of course. There are so many other factions, and not just other factions, but other ethnicities, you know, the non-Pashtuns, and they are huge.
Of
in
course.
Afghanistan, and they have their say in the political matters in the government as well.
Tajik, Turkmen, Uzbek, Baloch, they are the
Hazaras.
and even Gujar, one of the people living there. So all of them should be in the Lower Jarga through election process, and I believe this time Taliban have learned from their past mistake and they will improve that to involve all the different ethnic group in the democratic process, and they should be in the democracy or should be in the government through electoral process, and I think this is what the Taliban government should do. But currently situation is not good because the intra-Afghan dialogue is delayed and we are expecting it will be held in coming month, but still Ashraf Ghani is adamant that he is not going to release. He has already released 4,000 Afghan Taliban, but not releasing.
Still big number.
It's a big number, but still not releasing 600. So, I mean, he want to have some parley with Taliban, maybe using as a bargaining chip. And I think they should come to the table. They should come to the table, stop killing of Afghan people. They are killing each other, and both sides are Muslim brothers. I mean, they should stop it.
We are joined by Lieutenant General Retired Raza Muhammad Khan, renowned senior analyst and former president, National Defence University, Islamabad. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
General Raza, welcome to the show. Talking about Afghanistan, in a recent airstrike, 45 people were killed, and most of them were civilians. 6 of them were Taliban commanders. President Ghani is still not releasing 600 Taliban prisoners. Now, this wave of violence continues in Afghanistan. What is Ghani administration looking at? How do they want to settle their dispute, let's say, or this situation with the Taliban?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I was just listening to the discussion and I was very glad to hear an optimistic outcome, of the Afghan peace process. And I think if that happens, it will be good for Pakistan, for the region, and for Afghanistan itself. But, I would like to hasten to add that the road to peace in Afghanistan is still long, widening, and bumpy. And the reason for that is that the various contending factions are keeping their own political interests above the national interest of Afghanistan or the interest of the people of Afghanistan. That I can see that there is a lot of rigidity on that also, and that is a big impediment. At the same time, the present deal between the Taliban and the United States, it has a serious flaw that it does not specify who is going to be the mediator or the arbitrator to resolve the serious differences and the divergence between the current Afghan government and whatever the Taliban are desiring. The Taliban has always been calling themselves an Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. And last week, when Mr. Dostum on his promotion was being inaugurated, so he very clearly said in the presence of Mr. Abdullah that he should be given 6 months and he will wipe out the Taliban from Afghanistan. So one wonders, what is the stance of the Afghan government leaders. Of course, add to that the many spoilers, and we all know about them. And that is the reason that I think that this process is going to be slow. If there is, some kind of a rapprochement after the intra-Afghan dialogue starts, and if there is sufficient push by the United States and other regional players, then probably, something may happen just before the United States election. But I don't see anything happening before that, unless, pressures are put on all sides to change their very inflexible stance.
Right, and General Raza, you rightly said that this is the election year in the United States, and US would want to get out of Afghanistan as soon as possible, or perhaps reduce their presence in Afghanistan to the minimum. But do you think that Ghani administration would want to go for this peace deal? Because many people think that they are trying to evade, let's say, this peace deal, and they are trying to delay the process of intra-Afghan peace talks. since they're not releasing these 600 Taliban, this is going on. And keeping in mind that in the first place they were not okay with releasing the Taliban at all. It happened after Zalmay Khalilzad had several discussions with the Ghani administration. So do you think that Ghani administration wants to delay the process?
I think the Ghani administration would want that the US, NATO, ISAF should perpetually stay in Afghanistan so that they can continue to rule Afghanistan, and that the Taliban, they don't come to power, and if they try to come to power, then that power is denied to them by force. This is exactly the stance of the Indian government also, and therefore I would say that both the Indian government as well as the current Afghan government are one of the spoilers. Of course, you know, the United States is committed to pull out from Afghanistan, and that has been, you know, there are directions of the current US president, and one does not know that what will happen, you know, if President Trump does not get re-elected. But I think what is important is that Pakistan needs to prepare plans for all contingencies. The contingencies of the status quo, the contingency of the worst case scenario where there is some kind of a civil war, and
Right.
the contingency where, you know, the peace process succeeds, where the intra-Afghan dialogue succeeds, and an all-inclusive government is formed there. So our security forces, our foreign office must actually emphasize on that, and then so that they are prepared, you know, and they are not surprised
Right.
in the event of any eventuality.
Right. General Raza, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. Mr. Shafiq Ahmed, pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you very
Thank you for joining us. That's all from today's dialogue. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.